ball is crushed.
You're listening to the New York Yankees Recaps podcast, where we're talking New York Yankees baseball all season long. Recaps of big games, the best home run calls, trades, rumors, and what's happening down on the farm. Every game, all season long.
Hello, everybody. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in the same boat as me, basically on suicide watch, because there's no baseball, no sports whatsoever, no NBA, no NHL, no NCAA tournament. This March is just madness. Boom. So I know what you're thinking. This is a free 2 weeks to watch through Breaking Bad again or check out the new Die Hard movie that takes place in Russia. But damn it, I'm here for you to talk baseball because I know you guys on day 2 without Major League Baseball are already probably missing it. So I wanted to talk about some of the silver linings, some of the positives that could come out of a potentially significant delay to the start of the baseball season. Now, let's talk a bit about this coronavirus. So far, it seems to be shutting down pretty much everything for a few weeks. It seems as if this thing is going to pass through over the next few weeks, maybe a month. We're going to peak, and then we're going to kind of head downhill in terms of the number of new infections per day. That's what happened in other countries. Also, we have the added benefit, hopefully, now this isn't guaranteed, that some of the virus's ability to spread will die off as the weather heats up. It seems as if in hotter parts of the planet, such as like South Africa, this thing is not spreading as rapidly. So that might affect the timeline for this whole thing. There's also been some projections that this thing could go until June, and we could have up to 1 million infected at the beginning of June. Now, that would obviously put a damper on the baseball season, missing the first 2 months. I don't rule it out that we have a 3 or 4 month baseball season, maybe 80 or 100 games. I don't think they're going to want to can the whole season. I just don't. This is such a big industry. So many people rely on it. There's so much money in it. Not just the stadiums and the players all earning money, but the sponsors, all the restaurants and hotels around the stadiums in the cities. That's what these things are for. That's what baseball and sports are for, to drive traffic to the city, to drive business. It's a franchise. It is a business. It's a major cog in the business. And so I doubt they're going to cancel the whole season. They're going to wait for this thing to blow over, which will happen eventually. But until it does, we're left only to talk about baseball. So let's talk about baseball. Let's talk about some of the positives as to why this delayed season, let's just pretend it's going to start around May 15th. That'll be an extra 6 weeks or 7 weeks from the beginning of the season without baseball. An extra 49 games missing. So let's say they play about 110 games. Okay? What are some positives to that? Well, to start out with, there probably won't be many cold weather games, so we won't have to see guys running around in those ridiculous ski masks. There won't be any 30-degree weather with 20-degree wind chill this season. That's not going to happen now. And theoretically, that should prevent some of those early season muscle pulls that you see. A lot of times in April, guys get hurt because it's too cold to play baseball. You see a lot of hamstrings, a lot of obliques. They talk about it on the radio broadcast every year. They start too early, and guys just get hurt because baseball is not a sport that is meant for cold weather. And speaking of health, this delay gives a few of the Yankees a chance to come back early. Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton were both going to miss opening day. Now they both have a chance to heal. Also, James Paxton was not scheduled to be back until mid-May. Well, guess what? If the season is starting on May 15th, that's mid-May. So we might get James Paxton back for the whole season. That could solve our number 5 starter problem. It just becomes Jordan Montgomery, who's tremendous. Or it becomes Jay Happ, depending on who's pitching better. I do think they're going to have a bit of a spring training. I think they're going to take 2 weeks off. I think they might decide to take another week off, depending on how the pandemic is shaping up, who's sick and whatnot. But the Yankees voted to all stay in the complex and to practice and work out. Theoretically, they test everyone, test every single member of the team to see if they have coronavirus. If they don't, then there's no risk at spreading it. So you can just all hunker down together, grow and bond as a team, work on some more of those fundamentals, maybe get guys healthy, work on some new stretching drills, things like that. So this isn't all bad for the Yankees. Now, if it goes even longer, if it goes into June or July, then maybe we even get Aaron Hicks back for the beginning of the season. Now, the downside is, yes, we miss about half the season. So, not great. Another potential silver lining is that anybody who was going to have their innings hampered over a 162-game season will now be able to pitch according to schedule. So Jordan Montgomery, they might have held his innings back a little bit because he only pitched 5 or 6 innings last season, not including the minor leagues. Also, Garrett Cole has been overworked the last 2 years. He's thrown over 450 innings the last 2 seasons. That's a lot of pitches. And entering a 9-year contract in a season that the Yankees were expected to go deep into the playoffs, you're just asking for an injury in the next couple of years if he gets overtaxed again this year and next year. So this actually gives him a chance to rest up, recover, and get back to full strength. Not that he wasn't pitching great this spring. He's looked tremendous so far, but I'm kind of comfortable with him having his innings limited with throwing 150 innings instead of 210. So that's a good thing. Also, this allows some of the relievers to not be overtaxed when they enter the postseason, as the Yankees most certainly will. Last year, Ottavino was gassed going into the postseason. Chapman was beginning to get gassed near the end of the season. Now, I know he pitched pretty well in the postseason except for that one last pitch, but you could tell his velocity had dropped a little bit towards the end of the season. It came back up in the postseason, so maybe he was just kind of sandbagging, but, it's good to get him, maybe 40 appearances instead of 60. Also, guys like Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, who have been injured, will be able to play more because they're not going to be as taxed having to stretch out all of those games over 6 months. Younger guys like Gleyber Torres, who have played the majority of the last 2 seasons, were an injury risk because you can only play every game of a season so many times in a row before your body just gives out. It's just a fact of life. We're human beings. We're flesh and tissue and blood and connective tissue. And so things break when you overtax them. So this little bit of a break, an extended off season, if you will, could be good for pretty much everybody. If I had to guess, I think it'll be better for the offense because the pitchers were not able to fully ramp up this spring. We still had about 2 weeks left. And you know that with the cancellation of those 2 weeks plus the first 2 weeks of the Major League season, that's going to cause Major League Baseball to have to evaluate how long they actually want spring training to be once we start back up. I think it's going to be about 10 games. I think everybody's going to get 2 practice starts to try and get up to 5 or 6 innings, and then I think they're just going to go for it. So my guess is we're going to start around Memorial Day. It could be a little later, depending on this pandemic. Again, I'm not a prognosticator when it comes to health like that, but I think that they're going to probably start up around May 15th to May 20th with a shortened spring training, and I think we're going to play in front of empty stadiums for the first couple of weeks. I think that's just a fact of life. Even if it's not mandatory, I just don't think people are going to show up if you got 1 million people infected. But as the summer goes along, and as the weather gets hotter, this thing is going to die off, and that should bring the crowds back, bring the excitement back. However, people will be at risk again this fall because sometimes viruses mutate. In 1918, the Spanish flu burned off during the summer and then came back with a vengeance in the fall, having mutated and which was much deadlier. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Modern medicine will hopefully have at least some treatments by then. Guys are already working on it. I saw last night on one of the talk shows, there's a guy who was instrumental in the early development of an AIDS treatment that attacks the way the enzymes used when a virus replicates itself, and he's gone to work with his team on this issue. If you can slow down or impede a virus from copying itself, then that basically stops the spread. Now, it doesn't do anything to help the people who are already sick, but it could at least slow down the spread of this thing and flatten out that upper curve that you see of people getting infected. Another benefit to this whole thing, I think Major League Baseball, because pitchers are not going to be totally built up, are going to have to can that 3-batter rule, that 3-batter minimum rule that was going to be implemented for this season, because guys are going to need to come out of games. I mean, it's just, with all the uncertainty and all the changes, I think now's the wrong time to make wholesale rule changes. People are going to be excited to see baseball. Nobody's going to care about pace of play. Nobody does care about pace of play. I don't. I don't watch baseball for the fast-paced action. I watch it because it's something that relaxes me, that stimulates me, stimulates my mind. I like to think about the strategy. I like it because it's a marathon. It's every day, all summer. In some ways, it holds me prisoner because I watch every single game, but in some ways, it's also my escape after a long day of work. I get out of work, I like to do a nice workout, have a dinner, kick back and watch the game. This year's going to be a little different because I'm going to have to squeeze in some pre-game video recording there and then do some editing during the game in order to have something ready after the game. My goal is to have everything set up so that I can just drop in the highlights and then record a couple minutes of post-game comments after the game. So we'll see how that goes. Right now, I just want baseball to start back up, to be honest with you. But other things to consider, guys who are worried about their innings limit. Jonathan Loaizaga has never thrown more than 58 or 59 innings in a season before because he's so fragile, to borrow the Italian term from A Christmas Story. He's very fragile. He breaks down. He gets hurt. So if he ends up being the number 5 guy, and Paxton isn't ready or somebody else can't take the mound, he doesn't have to be stressed out with that workload. You can kind of limit his usage. He's very, very good when he's rested and healthy. Also, just as a fan perspective, with no sports, nothing going on for the next few weeks at least, now's a chance to go back and rewatch old games. I've got a few suggestions for you. You can watch David Wells' perfect game from May 17th, 1998. He was flat out disgusting that game. I wish we had more guys like David Wells. Just kind of an out-of-shape guy who just gets up there and just says, here's what I got, do your best to hit it. I loved his attitude. I get it. He was not the conventional Yankee, but fans loved him because, he wasn't afraid to be himself. He wasn't a corporate man. You could watch David Cohn's perfect game. David Cohn has become a great color commentator for the Yankees. I love listening to him talk. He seems to be the go-to guy for analytics. It's like they told him, hey, David, if you're going to be in the booth, you need to be the guy who learns about things like, expected batting average and, the rates of guys swinging outside of the zone and spin rate on breaking balls, what's good, what's not. He's the analytics guy. Michael Kay doesn't know anything about that. He understands OPS, but he's still a batting average, home runs, RBIs guy. Not that I blame him. I mean, that's what I grew up with too. So, I'm 36 years old. I'll be 37 in May, hopefully after the beginning of the start of the season. And I still look at the 3 main stat lines: batting average, home runs, RBIs. When I was growing up, I used to get dropped off at school before everybody else. And one of the things that I like to do was take the sports page of the newspaper. And this is back before the internet. We didn't have any internet in the school. Our computers just had old games like Oregon Trail, things like that, simple word processors. We had some shapes thing where we could make, little graphics. But what I would do is grab the newspaper, read the story about the last night's game, and I still read the newspaper every single day, although I've switched to digital. I go to my iPad now. But I would read the game, or read the game highlights, and then also read the box score. This is before you had cell phones, too. I couldn't just fire up the cell phone and watch the highlights of last night's game. Not to say you kids are spoiled, but you kind of are. In 1995 or 96, I just had this knack for memorizing box scores and batting averages. If you asked me on, July 17th, what was everybody's batting average, I probably could have told you. What everybody's home runs and RBI totals, I could have told you. Now I like it because you pretty much only have to know one main number, OPS. I could tell you that if somebody's got an OPS over 800, they're having a very nice season. That's one of the reasons Mike Ford was so impressive last year. 909 OPS in just 50 games or so. Tremendous. I'm actually crushing it with Mike Ford in my MLB The Show franchise. So I don't play as many video games as I used to. I find them to be a nice, respite from the day, a good way to unwind. So sometimes I'll play them before bed or whatever. But during this, period where there's no games on TV, I think that video games are a good way to go. I can play out the season. It's a good way to unwind, get your mind off the events of the world, stay inside. So if the streaming video games that I've had going are not your thing, you can just ignore them and just wait for my commentary. I will put out one of these podcasts every week, even during the outage, unless the season gets canceled, in which case I'll probably shut everything down and fire it back up next season. I've already got like 11 minutes of my documentary built, though, so I really hope the season doesn't get canceled, because otherwise I made a short documentary about the canceling of the 2020 season, which not as much fun, but I could upload that, we'll see. So anyways, this season I hope will begin in mid-May or earlier, but my guess is the earliest that it can begin is around May 15th. The latest it can begin is probably after the All-Star break. I don't think they're going to want to shorten it beyond an 81-game season. I could see them playing an 81-game season. If you play the first half of the season and then you go on strike, then yeah, you got to cancel the season. That's what happened in 1994. But if you basically miss the entire first half of the season, but everybody starts up at the same time, you can still play the second half of the season. You can still play out the postseason. So I think we will have a baseball season. I don't know if it's going to start in May or June, but it will start. Hang in there. Now, if you don't have MLB The Show, you're not into video games, there's a ton of great Yankees games that you can watch, the classic games. As I was mentioning, there's a game where in the postseason, I think it was ALCS Game 1 or Game 2 of 2000, when Roger Clemens struck out 15 batters. You can at least watch the highlights of that. You can watch, if you're into happy endings, the 2003 ALCS Game 7, where Yankees current manager Aaron Boone, hit a walk-off home run against Tim Wakefield to send the Yankees to the World Series. I believe every game from that entire ALCS is online. At least highlights. Sometimes it's fun to just watch highlights of old games. MLB's YouTube channel has a ton of that stuff. They also have a searchable highlight reel on their website, MLB.com. One of the games I watched recently on YouTube was actually Hideki Irabu's Major League debut. Now, if you don't know about Hideki Irabu, he was one of the Yankees' highest hyped, most high-priced, at the time, international free agents. He actually wasn't a free agent to the Yankees. He was posted and signed by the San Diego Padres. The Yankees traded top prospect at the time, Ruben Rivera, to the Padres to get him. Ruben Rivera went on to become kind of a bust. He had a couple of big home run seasons, but ultimately he was not a good player. He was the cousin of Mariano Rivera. So anyway, the Yankees acquired Hideki Irabu, who came to New York with all this hype. But that was the summer that I moved from New York to North Carolina. So I actually was without Yankee baseball for his debut. I had to read about it in the paper, and I never actually got to see his debut. But the other day I was just feeling kind of bored, and so I Googled it. I said, Hideki Irabu, Yankee debut, and I found a Japanese version of it where they just show every pitch of his debut, but they have Japanese voiceover, Japanese announcers. So it wasn't quite the same. Anyway, I watched through Irabu's debut since I never got to see it the first time. It's a shame that he never panned out because he had very good stuff. He was 94, 96. He had kind of a straight fastball, and he would miss with it too much. He would miss right over the plate. Also, he wore down. he was not a guy who was in great shape. So he would wear down not only in individual games, but over the course of the season. In 1998, he was the pitcher of the month for May, and was actually considered to start the All-Star game. I think he was 11-2 at one point, but then I think he finished like 13-8. He really struggled down the stretch in the second half and didn't factor into the postseason at all. I don't think he pitched a single inning. I think he was left off the roster, but he did get a World Series ring. He got a couple of World Series rings with the Yankees. He actually wasn't bad in 1999 either, though he wasn't as good as he was in 98. And he was quite a character. He used to smoke cigarettes while he was throwing his bullpen. You know, he was about 250 pounds. He was like a right-handed Japanese version of David Wells. You know? So, all right. Anyway, have fun watching classic games. I'll try and check back in occasionally if the Yankees have any updates. Would not surprise me if somebody does still get hurt over this time because they are still working out. So I'll let you know if there are injuries or things like that if they make it out. I haven't heard any plans to have inter-squad games or scrimmage games of that kind, so I think they're just going through, team workouts, drills, things like that, probably on-the-field batting practice, probably throwing drills, things like that. They're probably running and staying in shape. The Yankees are going to be a World Series contender, so the longer that they can stay together and stay in shape, the bigger advantage they have over the other teams. So I'd have a hard time imagining that the Orioles are staying in shape and staying down, together at their complex. They probably went home. And so when the Yankees face off against them, if they indeed begin from the beginning of the schedule and don't just pick up wherever they were going to leave off, if the season starts in May, you might just begin wherever the schedule was going to begin with. So, who knows? They might have to change the schedule to balance it out, but that would throw off all sorts of logistics. So MLB is working through all this. So anyway, I'm rambling now. I'm going to wrap it up. You guys have a safe couple of weeks, and I'll try and touch base.